Good afternoon and welcome. If you came to hear about the billion-dollar bet and how the world's largest beer and beverage company has contributed to reducing harm and advancing public health, you are in the right space. Thank you so much to all of our students, our executives, our faculty, staff, colleagues for being here with us today. This is the premiere and case launch for Business for Impact's newest case study about the global smart drinking goals. And we are in for a treat today, not just because you can enjoy your zero alcohol beer. I hope everybody got food. If you're still coming in, help yourself. I'm Leslie Crutchfield. I'm Executive Director of Business for Impact and Adjunct Professor of Corporate Social Responsibility here at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. And it is my true pleasure to kick off this panel today. We have some amazing, distinguished guest speakers. I'm going to introduce the panel briefly, then frame our discussion for today. First, from AB InBev, we have Kata Garcia. Kata is a global director and VP in corporate affairs, and also a director of the foundation at AB InBev, and near and dear to our heart, a member of the Business for Impact Advisory Group for going on 5 years now here at McDonough School of Business. We're also joined by John Blood, Chief Legal and Corporate Affairs Counsel at AB InBev on our panel. Rounding out the panel, Ladad Montegui, my partner in good trouble here, co-professor of CSR here in the McDonough School of Business, and the lead author of the Global Smart Drinking Case. And last but not least, we have Bill Novelli, a man who needs no introduction, but since I'm making introductions, Bill is really one of the preeminent pioneers in corporate purpose. He founded Porter Novelli, the global communications and marketing company, which was really one of the first purpose-forward companies, long before we had B Corps and many of these other types of shared value industry players. Bill came to Georgetown and created Business for Impact more than 15 years ago. It was initially called the Global Social Enterprise Initiative for those faculty that have been around for a while. He came from AARP, where he was the CEO and led on expanding access to affordable prescription drugs for Medicaid, Medicare participants, and as an advocate for public health, was the founding president and continues to be the chair today of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, which is fighting tobacco use. And in our studies here at Georgetown McDonough, there's no single change that's happened in this century, in this lifetime, that's had a more positive impact on public health in the United States than the tobacco control movement, right? The amount of death and disease prevented from an easily preventable behavior. So thanks to the tobacco control movement. We first got to know AB InBev because we were interested in movements. And what is the intersection of business, nonprofit, government for solving big, complex challenges? And we decided to write this teaching case at the invitation of AB InBev because we were really curious, how does a company that stands to potentially lose along the bottom line by trying to advance public health? You know, if you're thinking about reducing harmful drinking, doesn't that mean drinking less? Doesn't that mean selling less beer? Why is that in a company's interest? And these are the kinds of questions that we love to think about here at McDonough. How do you balance the triple bottom line, the needs of people and their health and the planet, and still make a profit? Because indeed, we are here in a business school, right? And the big challenges that we face in our world, whether they're health or climate or division and polarized democracies, whatever the issue, no single business or industry is alone responsible for causing these problems, and no industry or sector alone can solve it, right? We need business, government, nonprofits working together. And that's what we do at Business for Impact. We look at that intersection of cross-sector partnerships and how could we advance what we call doing well by doing good at Business for Impact. Now, you're going to hear about the case from our panelists. At the center of each table, you've got one copy, and digital copies are available online. But to set it up, we want to go back in time. Let's go back to 2015, a little over a decade ago. The World Health Organization, WHO, said harmful uses of alcohol is a major preventable contributor to disease, death, injury, and harm. And they put out a challenge. Let's reduce the harmful use of alcohol by 10% globally within a decade. AB InBev and the leaders you'll hear from today rose to that challenge. They committed $1 billion, and they said over the next decade, we are going to do everything we can to advance that WHO goal. It needed to be a big, bold investment because this problem is big and complex, and it affects every community in every country on the face of the earth. You know, if you think about it, the harmful uses of alcohol related to driving, drinking and driving, drunk driving crashes, and the victims and the survivors' lives forever changed. Violence emanating from abuse of alcohol, particularly gender-based violence. We just came out of the Super Bowl. This always goes up, depending on who wins, right, around this time. Soccer matches, a big problem in South Africa that the company was looking at. You've got illicit alcohol. You know, one of the biggest problems in the global South, particularly in African nations, is not regulated products, but the illicit products that are cheap, available. Young people, children, adults alike are basically drinking, you know, turpentine, going blind, getting sick. And you might say, well, that's not a commercial company like AB InBev's problem, but it is, right? And how do they be part of solutions? Latin America. We got Latin America in the house, the global, if you're with the global competitive leadership program here at McDonough, raise your hand. Okay, I think we probably have almost every Latin American country represented here. What do you guys like to do in Latin America? Drink? Yes. You like to party. It's a party culture, right? And I don't even think you go out until like 10 or 11 at night and you go all night. So how do you keep the party going without drinking too much, getting alcohol poisoning, getting sick, right? These are the problems that are material to AB InBev's business. And unlike other companies that might try and, you know, give philanthropy over here and don't look over here at the harms we're doing, they said, we're going to put all of our investments in trying to reduce harmful use of alcohol. It wasn't perfect. We're going to hear about the 4 global smart drinking strategies that they employed, and LaDon's going to give us insight into how they performed against their goals. They won some, they lost some. There was some unexpected breakthroughs. The last thing I want to say, because we are here at a university, in full transparency and disclosure, AB InBev provided a grant to this university so that we could conduct this research. How do you responsibly conduct research when you're getting money from your subject, right? What we tried to do was take an objective look, describe and understand what worked and what didn't. So I got here this glass of water next to the Stella Zero. What does this look like to you? Glass half full or half empty? Half full. Half full. Anybody saying it's half empty? What's another way to describe this cup? It's 4 ounces of water in an 8-ounce glass. That's what we try and do in academia. What's the truth? All you can really say as a fact, 4 ounces of water in an 8-ounce glass. It's up to you to decide, is it half full? Is it half empty? And what LaDon and our team here have tried to do with this case study is understand not just how much water is in here, but how did it get half full? What would it take to fill it all the way? And what can other companies do to replicate and learn from both the successes and the mistakes, the trial and error from this bold leader. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our fearless moderator, our great friend and colleague, Bill Novelli. Welcome.
Leslie Crutchfield, thank you so very much. I wish that everybody could take your and LaDawn's course in corporate social marketing. John, Kata, and all of your AB InBev friends here today, welcome back to Georgetown. You've been our Business for Impact partners for a long time. It's been a very productive relationship. And as Leslie said, we're here today to talk about your unique initiative on global smart drinking goals and the lessons that we can draw for business-led social impact. And John, let's start with you. You've got a big portfolio at the company. As AB InBev's Chief Legal and Corporate Affairs Officer, you've been deeply involved in this program. And the company made a huge investment, as Leslie said, $1 billion over the past 10 years to drive down harmful drinking and to promote moderation in alcohol consumption. Why did you do this, John? And how did you come to embark on this major journey?
Thanks, Bill, and it's always a pleasure to be here at Georgetown University with you and your colleagues. Let me step back a little bit to 10 years ago. Moderation, responsible drinking is something that the company has been working on for decades. But about 10 years ago, we asked ourselves, does it work? We had all these programs all over the world, anti-drunk driving campaigns, moderation campaigns, how to have a positive impact with alcohol, education, awareness, what we should say on the bottles. But we never stopped and said, does it work? I thought it worked. I thought the ones that we were focusing on were the right ones, but we didn't know. And the only way to find out was to step back and say, we can't do that. We need to work with others. We need others to set the metrics to judge us. We need others to go out and write the academic papers about what works, what didn't work. We need others and partner with others so that we could understand, do these programs work? And you can't do that in 6 months. You can't do that in a year, which is why we said, let's take the 10 years. First, let's find out all over the world and experiment. Let's start our programs. Let's start with a baseline. Let's measure it. Let's see what works. And then once we understand what works, what can we scale? And what we found what worked were simple things. Things like training servers, people who sell alcohol, to make sure they don't sell to children, to make sure they don't sell to those who shouldn't be drinking. What worked were things like road safety programs, anti-drunk driving campaigns. But the one that worked the most was called screening and brief interventions. And that's something that the medical community had been doing for years, but they're doing in bits and pieces. And particularly in developing economies, it's very difficult to get doctors, oftentimes in short supply. Think of a doctor in Mozambique and all the patients that he's seeing. It's a big market for us, Mozambique. But that doctor, when we go talk to them, can't go out and say, I can't have a conversation with this patient about alcohol because I need to treat maybe a tropical disease that they have, maybe a broken leg. I don't have time. So what we work with them was say, is there a way for us to do it through a cell phone, through a chatbot, through AI, to make sure that the doctor can talk to them? Maybe we're in their waiting room. They can ask them questions that we in the West get all the time. You go to your doctor and he says, so, do you ever drink alcohol? Yeah, I do. How much do you drink? Well, I drink this much. Depending on how you answer those questions, there are interventions that the doctor will do. So you can do that with one doctor. We could spend money to do it. But really the key here was we just didn't want to see what worked. We wanted to see what would work at scale because we wanted to have impact on the most people. We could spend a lot of money on one city block and really reduce harmful consumption of alcohol. But that wasn't really what this was about. It was about how do we expand it so we can have an impact not on one city block, but on millions of people. So that's where we started, and that's where we are today, Bill.
John, is there a paradox here? Leslie referred to it. So whenever you do increase moderation, it's good for public health, it's good for safety. But the more successful you are, potentially, the more it impacts your bottom line. How do you feel about that?
You know, when I think about this sort of tension, Bill, what I always think about is, look, I don't come down to earth and go market my products and run social responsibility campaigns. I don't live on Mars and come here, do some campaigns and go home. I drive the same roads that you do and everyone does. My children drive the same roads that they do. My family, my community has the same impact and effects from the negative use of alcohol. I see it. We live it. My 135,000 colleagues all around the world feel it as well. So we need to do something here. So I start with the basic premise of it's the right thing to do, so we need to do it. Secondly, from a commercial aspect, when I look at the business impact, we need to follow where our consumers are. So if our consumers are concerned about health, wellness, if they are looking for balanced choices, we as a business need to meet them there. We need to anticipate what they're going to do. And there you see things like the development of no alcohol beers. Now, no alcohol beers have been around for decades. But Bill, they don't taste like they do today. And that's because we invested in research, development. We have different strains of yeast. Most people will know from their basic chemistry that yeast will go out in a brewing process, eat the sugars or the starches that are out there, and they'll excrete carbon dioxide and alcohol. Well, you can get a yeast and develop a yeast that produces less alcohol. You can make the process where you remove the alcohol much more gentle. So this way, when a consumer is at a bar, they can stake a Stella Liberté, a Stella 0.0 with no alcohol in it, be proud to hold it up. So the others at the bar aren't like, is there a problem? Why are you drinking that? They can proudly hold that up. It's different occasions. Commercially, that's very beneficial for us. It increases the number of occasions and servings. For the consumer, it's much more about that balanced lifestyle that they're looking with. So we can do that and still have a much more profitable business. And what we've seen, particularly for beer, is that beer compound annual growth rates have increased for the last 10 years. They're projected to also increase, yet the sheer amount of alcohol in the system is going down. Think of it as having a 5% beer and a 4.5% beer. Still commercially very good for us. And if that's where consumers are going to be, we need to encourage that, and we need to make sure that we deliver only what we can do, which is what's in the bottle.
That's fascinating. Well, we're having a taste test here today, right? LaDawn, my good friend.
Hi, Bill.
You're a leader in teaching and practicing and studying this whole area of corporate social responsibility. So you led the Georgetown study for AB InBev.
I did.
And this billion-dollar investment, I love to say that, billion-dollar investment, which was a landmark in social responsibility. And in the study, we found that while AB InBev achieved many of its goals, it fell short on some others. And it had some unexpected breakthroughs. So tell us about this.
Sure. Thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to write the study. It was truly a labor of learning for certain and tasting to know what I'm writing about. This was landmark because companies do not do 10-year strategies, especially when it comes to corporate social responsibility. That's big. They also don't necessarily put $1 billion behind it in investments. But the 10-year commitment, I think, is important because this was done in a period where AB InBev stuck with it through some serious headwinds. There was a global pandemic, and the impacts of the pandemic was that, people couldn't gather. So the places where AB InBev would sell its products basically were all shut down and had a market effect. Nevertheless, they persisted. There was an economic downturn as well. Huge. So when people don't have money to spend, they're not necessarily going to spend it on leisure efforts or leisure products. The third thing is, and very important, AB InBev did this despite the skepticism of those who they were trying to collaborate with. So AB InBev partnered with public health. They said, we're going to be part of this World Health Organization global endeavor to reduce harmful drinking. We're going to be a partner in this. And it's those health ministers and other health experts who are saying, yeah, they can't be a part of the solution. Alcohol companies can't be a part of the solution because you're the ones who are creating the problem. Yet, at the same time, the WHO was saying, we need everybody. We need all partners. We need industry. We need nonprofits. We need everybody to help move the needle on this. So AB InBev really stepped up to do that. In terms of the goals, there were 4 key goals that AB InBev set. One was to do pilots in 6 cities. John referenced some of the learning opportunities. And in 6 markets that were really important to the company. And to test things to see what actually works, what moves the needle in terms of what they can then take and scale. The second goal was to put guidance labels on all of their beer products in the countries where it's not even mandated. So it was a voluntary effort to put guidance labels on the harms of drinking for if you're underage, if you are pregnant, and other efforts. And then the third goal was around investing in social norms marketing, which is basically educating people about what these issues are and what the effects are. The last goal was about creating no and low alcohol products and to penetrate the market at a 20% rate. So what was really interesting is, I'm going to kind of take it on anchors on this. First of all, social norms marketing was a goal, but the effect was really that it was a force multiplier for the other 3 goals. It helped to reinforce those. So that was a really key component there. The labeling, they hit. They rolled out these guidance labels in countries, and it was not easy. I really want John to tell that story because that actually stood out. But the anchors really are, in terms of the pilots, the company had 3 test labs. The city pilots were the external test lab where they could try things out, learn from what works, and then scale. The internal test lab was an innovation lab where they were improving on the elements where they could create these non-alcoholic products, the wheat, the yeast, et cetera. So that was an internal. And then the third lab was actually peer-to-peer learning and these peer practice groups of social marketers, and not just social marketers, pardon me, marketers and other parts of the business from around the world who would get together and share what they were doing and what they were learning. So those were really the elements of the goals. And the non-alcoholic beers were the one that they really missed the mark, yet it was the one that actually transcended, because it ended up being the piece that really penetrated the business and went from being a smart drinking goal element to being now a business priority. It is a business priority for the company today. I'll stop there and we can talk about some of these other aspects later too.
Dawn, as you and our colleagues waded through all these interviews, all the data, took a look at everything, what surprised you? What innovations did you come away with that you could offer other companies and our students and faculty?
Yeah. So I'll say 2 things. One is the big criticism was that AB InBev could have measured better. Not more, but better. There were metrics when it came to the social marketing campaigns, et cetera. There were impressions measured and other things measured. On the front end, when solutions were being developed, they used metrics from public health experts about what to do, so they were trying to incorporate in. But inside the company, the staff said we needed KPIs. We really were looking for KPIs so that we could also really make this more of a priority, not just a nice to do. So hearing that from the company showed me that there was a will from the staff across markets to want to do this. And so that was one surprise. The other was partnerships. And AB InBev ran into some real blocks. Public health didn't want them at the table, didn't necessarily want them as a partner. Locally, when they went to create these opportunities in communities in South Africa, in Colombia, in Mexico, in other markets, there was skepticism. But what AB InBev learned is that for them to be able to do this credibly and to actually put the effort forward and do something about reducing harmful drinking, they had to give up some control, or a lot of control, and bring their best assets and let the communities lead, or let the partners lead. So those were two of the really, really important things that I took away.
Really interesting. Kata, I've watched you and worked with you over some period of time, participated in some social marketing conferences with you. You've been a driver in all this. So you've championed what we're calling these social marketing initiatives, social norm marketing, which LaDawn referred to. What is that? Can you define that a little bit for us and tell us some of your favorite examples?
Of course. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for this incredible audience for being here. I will start with a story. The story is about how I joined the company. I joined the company, the global office 10 years ago, right when we launched the goals. And I was in a meeting and I said, Kata, here are the goals. We need you to help us implement those goals. And when I read them and I saw the 1 billion commitment in social norms marketing, I said, well, first I need to understand what does social norms marketing mean. So I went into reading and, of course, finding experts like you guys that were with us since the beginning, and some other experts in social marketing. So it was all about changing norms, changing positive norms and reinforcing positive behaviors by using the power of our brands and the power of marketing, by communicating in a way that reinforces moderation, reinforces responsible drinking, and it is aligned to the attributes and to the purpose of the brands. So that really caught my attention to learn more on how to use this power of marketing that has the reach with the consumers. Marketing delivers products and different choices to what consumers want. So we learn about this methodology, bringing this social norms technique by integrating actionable advice, and we created a competition among our colleagues, 1,000 colleagues around the world from marketing. We have one of the best marketeers in the world learning about this social norms marketing, bringing together ideas, and it became one of our largest training platforms, so they can deliver, they can really bring innovation to the brands. And one of the things that I can bring is that we're using the different occasions that consumers enjoy in sports, in music, and bringing all this methodology of social norms marketing into these occasions so that consumers can enjoy better, can drink better, enjoy the occasion longer, alternate with no alcohol beer. So it's all about bringing together not also our stakeholders to learn and experts to learn, but also our internal stakeholders, marketing, sales. All of us in the company have a role to play. We have toolkits, we have resources for these trainings, but now I can say that it has become a mindset. Everybody knows how to do these social marketing initiatives and programs and campaigns and measure the impact. As LaDawn was saying, we have been learning how to measure better every time. We have been doing this across the world in different countries some countries leading the way, like Latin America. The group of the leadership of Latin America should be proud because they are very creative. But of course, Africa, Europe, Asia, they bring other ideas, and those ideas are localized to their context, to the consumer needs. So it has been a learning process, very interesting learning around social norms marketing, and we can say now that we run the largest competition of its kind with these ideas, everybody competing for the best campaign, winning awards, but beyond everything is learning, and it's an improvement process. Every day we learn more, we share, and we learn.
Kata, you talk about a mindset. One of the most interesting and I think exciting things about all this is that you and John said you want to make social marketing the norm at AB InBev. How are you going to do that?
It has been a process of starting small. And it connects with what I said before. We said, how can we bring all our colleagues together to learn and incorporate these social norms techniques and marketing so that we follow the concept of shared value. We're doing good for our business and doing good for the community, doing good for our consumers. And consumers love brands that care. So we started small with this idea of launching the competition and bringing the teams together. And today I can say we have received 650 ideas over the years. 1,000 colleagues trained, and we have implemented many of them every year, investing more than $100 million in this campaign, social norms marketing. So now it has become part of our day-to-day. Moderation is who we are, is beer, is part of our DNA. So the mindset turning to the norm is moderation is cool, and we are now living a trend that consumers want moderation. Consumers want choices, and we are providing a broad portfolio of products, more than 500 brands, including no alcohol beer, almost over 25 brands we have in more than 40 countries. So we're very proud and continue innovating and improving our products so that consumers can really enjoy and have the best experience in drinking beer in moderation.
That's impressive. LaDawn, of that $1 billion, I love to say that, $1 billion, AB InBev spent $500 million on campaigns designed to change consumer behavior and norms on drinking. So including the examples that Kata just mentioned, what impact did that have? What would you say is the social return on investment?
Yeah, that's where I talk about that goal being more of a force multiplier. You can put these other goals out there. You can try and sell the product, but unless you're actually helping to understand what the product is and market it properly, then you're not going to get the adoption. And so I think with some of the social norms marketing campaigns, it helps to reinforce that. When it comes to the guidance labels, as an example, that was really important because what it was trying to do was actually go in and where there's not government regulation, try and put into place the elements and a message that says, be careful when you drink, make the right choices. And what I found interesting was when you look at the labels, for example, the cautionary labels on beers, if you go and just look at a normal beer here in the US, you'll see a whole bunch of little tiny writing. I don't know about your eyes, but my eyes, even with these glasses, it's really hard to read, and I don't know if I even want to read it, right? They used icons instead, so visual. And so if you put a visual compared to words, what's going to capture your attention more quickly for an action? So I think those kinds of things were instructive and were lessons that others can take away. And so that's social norms marketing, putting those icons that were tested. And these were things that experts, academics had tested in other markets and knew from research that then AB InBev took. It's not like AB InBev just created them and said, hey, let's do this. But they listened to experts who said, this is a model that you should try. This is what's worked elsewhere. Try it. And so they adopted what academics, experts from Tufts University elsewhere had said, this should work for you. And so it was integrated into social norms approach as one example to be able to educate, right, on all beer products regardless. So that was key. The other part I'll say is at these mega platform events, at the Olympics, at Super Bowl, we were recently there, where John showed Leslie and I basically, how they utilize these platforms of major events to still educate and be able to tell people, enjoy the event, but at the same time, make sure you have a plan for a safe ride home, okay? So, and they did that in partnership here in the US, for example, with Anheuser-Busch, MAD, which for some of you who may not know is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Uber. So a partnership there. And that was another social norms marketing campaign effort. So it helps to educate, it reinforces at a major event, enjoy your time, enjoy your beverage, but act responsibly and do in moderation. And here's a resource for you. So these are some of the examples, and that's why it's important. This is the way you can actually continue to do your business, continue to do well, and make sure that it's good both for the community, the society, and for the business.
That partnership is great. That's just a great partnership. Yeah. And what it shows really is that the company is not going to put this report on the shelf. They're going on to the next stage of the journey. So, LaDawn, what advice do you have for John and for Kata to stay on track? And beyond that, what advice do you have for other companies who want to do something, who want to do well by doing good?
Sure. Measure. We've talked about this, right? But it's not just about numbers for the sake of numbers. Data drives everything we do now. But data isn't data for data's sake. Unless you can glean from it what it is telling you, it doesn't mean anything. So I think, for any company, any organization, to be able to track what it is that you're doing, how it's performing before and after, and then be able to understand from there where you need to make pivots, where do you act, it's a wiser investment that way in terms of what you're doing and what you plan to do. So that's one. The other is that the partnerships piece is really critical. Now, we talked about how with the WHO's goal, nobody can do this alone. They need partners and all of that. Great. Some things you can do on your own. This one you can't. But the other question really is, even if you can do it alone, should you? If you can do it with others, you got broader reach. And if you have it with credible partners as well coming together, you have the credibility and endurance and longevity of the effort. I think those are two really critical components. And then the last part I'll say is in terms of scale, what was really important for AB InBev in scaling was that they used digital platforms for the ESBI that John mentioned. They use digital platforms also as part of the training of those servers at major events, bars, et cetera. So they were able to get a broader reach. However, the partnerships also were critical for scale because with partners, they're able to reach others who are not necessarily their direct consumers. So the efforts can go broader. And I think that's important too for others to take away in their efforts.
Yeah, for sure. This public-private partnerships thing is interesting. John, were you exasperated by governments and public health professionals and others saying, why would we want to deal with a beer company?
Bill, I can remember a time not very long ago, 10 years ago, where I couldn't go to the United Nations and talk, right? That I couldn't find anyone, right, who was willing to engage with us. And then what we needed to do was say, we can do two things. We can complain about that, or we can try to change it. And what we did was we took the latter. So we started to work with people and say, there are things that we can do that only we can do. In other words, what's in the can? What's in the bottle? How do we market? All of those things are things that only we in industry can do. But they are never enough to go move the needle on these wide societal problems that we have. So we can do all we want about what we put in the can and how we advertise what our products are. But what we can't do is meaningfully change drunk driving rates without going out into the community, without understanding from those who live there about how to do it, about what's going to resonate, what's going to work. So that idea of partnership was critical to us. And I'll give you an example. We started to talk to the United Nations to say, here's what we do in connection with road safety. Here's what we can provide for you in connection with road safety initiatives to reduce drunk driving, but also other road safety initiatives as well. So we went to them, we said we're going to roll this out in certain cities around the world, we'll show you the data, and eventually what they said was, we would love to take this and really scale it up. So the United Nations Institute of Training and Research has a whole series of offices around the world. So if you have a best practice, if you have a real insight, you can take that from, say, a city in Zacatecas where we tested it in Mexico, but we can have that impact in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in other parts of South America through the United Nations Institute of Training and Research called UNITAR. And when we started to work with UNITAR, what we said was, look, I don't want to brand it. I'm going to give you all the data. I'm going to give you all the toolkits. I'm going to give you all the information. You work with it. Make it a part of UNITAR. I don't want any credit. I don't want anything like that. All I want is to see a reduction in the harmful use of alcohol. And when we started to see the world that way, when we started to say there are things that we can do, but we can't do it alone, or they're much, much better when we do it with UNITAR, when we do it with Zacatecas, when we do it with Sao Paulo, when we do with South Africa, you start to get what we really wanted to do at the start of this program, which is to have scale, right? And scale is the ability to take something successful and make the impact much more widespread. So when the United Nations says it wants a 20% reduction in the harmful use of alcohol, right, that's a major number. What that requires literally is scale. And the one thing that we have is scale in industry. We sell our products in almost every country in the world. We are in 60 countries where we have operations. We are in the largest markets. We understand scale. So what we can do is partner with folks so they can have a real impact. So it's not just a success in Zacatecas, Mexico. It's not just that town. We can scale it out all over the world. And that's why public-private partnerships really are the solution going forward. But to do that, we have to be very clear. Man, we have to be transparent. The data is not ours. People can write whatever they want about it. LaDon is free to write good, bad, somewhere in the middle. I'm okay with all that. In fact, the only reason that I work with LaDon and you in Georgetown is, at the beginning, you told me, hey, just so you know, we're going to write whatever we see. And in my world, you just call balls and strikes like baseball.
Yeah.
Man, that's all I want. That's how I'm going to learn, and that's how I'm going to get better. So we do appreciate the honesty, even though sometimes people in the company say, oh, what about this? Hey, take the feedback, and let's use it and move forward. Feedback is a gift, I'm told. So thank you for the gift, LaDon.
Thank you for the
You know,
pushback.
this school grades on a curve. Did you know that? Speaking of baseball, you and your team have hit at least a triple. So you're not going to rest on your laurels. Where do you go from here?
You know, Bill, at the end of 10 years, right, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to look back, we wanted to learn, we wanted to see what was successful, and I talked about scaling that. So what we're going to do going forward is, clearly we're going to put foot on the gas and scale those programs that work. But from a strategy standpoint, we had a decision to make. we could take the same 4 goals and we could adjust them. Well, we made this amount, so we're going to take this one up 10%, this one up 10%. Maybe we had a new goal at 10%. And I got thinking and said, you know what? That was super helpful 10 years ago. But I started to think about a book, a very tiny book that I read many years ago. And it's by David Foster Wallace. And David Foster Wallace is an author, and he gave a graduation speech at Kenyon University several years ago. And in that speech, he talked about this is water. And just indulge me a little bit, because this was the genesis of what we do next. David Foster Wallace does this great graduation speech where he talks about 2 young fish swimming in the ocean. And they start to approach an older fish. And as they get close, the older fish says, "Hey, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish don't say anything, and they swim past. Finally, they stop, and one young fish says to the other fish, "What's water?" And for me, right, what I want is social responsibility. What I want is social norms marketing. What I want is everything that we worked on to be the water at AB InBev. I want that to be the question when someone says, "What's water?" Because they don't even know, because it's so obvious. It's the air they breathe. It's all the budgets they build. It's all the marketing that they do. It's every brand that they launch. All of that needs to be imbued with social norms marketing, needs to be imbued with this idea of labeling, needs to be imbued with all the things we're talking about, needs to become, Kata says the DNA, I describe it as the water. So going forward, how do we get there? Man, we're never going to know 100% how to get there, but the idea is start making it the water we live in.
That's great. So we're going to go to questions, but I want to give the last word to LaDawn, the teacher, the report writer. So LaDawn, what do you want to say to students? What do you want to say to businesses? What can they do?
Yeah, leverage your business for businesses, right? I mean, there are lessons in this case, in this example, for every sector. For the nonprofits, it's a matter of be open to sitting at the table with those who you may be working not always with, and listen and collaborate and be a solution provider, partner with them on a solution. To governments, it is also about collaboration, listening and learning, and moving together to really move the needle. For industry, it's align with your core business in order to be credible, and work with your skeptics, work with them as collaborators and partners. And when you move corporate responsibility not as an add-on, as something you do here, but something that is your water, your DNA, where you're leveraging your greatest assets to actually deliver, that's when you hit the mark. And for students, look, we get people in our corporate responsibility class and in our offices saying, I really, really want to work at AB InBev on the corporate responsibility team. How do I get there? And the answer really is, don't aim for the corporate responsibility job. Take all the principles that we're talking about. Take the strategies and the mindset that we're talking about. You're going in with a mindset of wanting to have impact in the communities. Go do that. Sitting in finance. Go do that. Sitting in supply chain and logistics. Go do that in sales. Doesn't matter where you are. Go do that.
That's the best advice anybody could give. Okay, we're going to go to questions. We've got bright lights in our eyes, so raise your hand, and I'll be glad to call on you, and the mic is coming your way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Genaro from Mexico. I have a question related to how do you measure your impact? Like, do you think that the customers of the AB InBev products are more conscious about, let's say, not driving and drinking in comparison of other companies that doesn't invest $1 billion into this kind of campaigns? Or is this more like an industry effort? Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of take that to start. It's really an excellent question, and it's one we tried to face at the beginning. So when we said that we wanted to have a reduction in the harmful use of alcohol, what did that mean? So let's take Zacatecas, Mexico, which was one of our pilot programs. We didn't measure consumers of Grupo Modelo, which is how we go to market in Mexico. It wasn't the consumers of Corona and Modelo that we were talking about. We thought that that wasn't the right metric to measure. If we were going to have a community and a societal impact, we needed to measure the whole community and the whole society. So when we talked about the reduction of harmful consumption of alcohol, we were measuring whether people were drinking Modelo, Pacifico, Corona, whether they were drinking tequila, whether they were drinking wine. We were measuring all of it, because precisely what your question gets at is it's no good if it's only on your own, or it's not good enough if it's only on your own. What we needed to do was measure the real question, because when you're driving down the road, you don't care if someone is a drunk driver, what they drank. All you care about is that they are impaired. So for us, it was measuring everything about it. And when we started, we didn't have the right methodology to go do that. That needed to be created. And we weren't the right people to create that. We needed to work with NGOs, academics, others in the community to say, you draw the baseline. You tell us where the starting line is. We'll run our program, and then you measure where we got to. But most importantly, all the data is transparent. You can write whatever you want about it. You can publish any paper you want on it. We won't pre-read it. We won't see it. We don't get a say in it. Do whatever you want with it. And that was the key to buying credibility from those who wouldn't engage with us. Because we said, transparency is the key here. So the question is, it was much more communal than it was anything about our brands. But we needed to start with our brands. And one of the things that we do is we work with others in our industry who share these goals to also say, we should work as an industry together on it. Now, does that mean we all run the same campaigns? No. Heineken will run anti-drunk driving ads that fit its brand. Because one of the things that we know is that if you just run an anti-drunk driving ad and say, don't drink and drive, drink responsibly, man, the impact is basically zero. What you need to do is speak in the voice of the brand. Those who are consuming that brand are doing for a reason. They're doing it because they like the taste, they like the imagery, they like to be associated with what that brand stands for. And when you speak in the brand voice for an anti-drunk driving campaign, then you can have the impact. But that means Heineken needs to speak in its voice, Carlsberg needs to speak in its voice, Tecate needs to speak in its voice. Together, you can really have a much bigger impact.
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm a first-year MBA student here at McDonough. I'm in a class with a few folks here called Washington Business and the World, so this is a very relevant topic for us. My question is around the $1 billion and the decision. Were there any dissenters? Who made that decision? Was it unanimous? What did the dissenters say, if there were any of them? Were the employees involved? Was the board involved? Were other stakeholders involved in that decision-making? And I want to know also, how did you land on $1 billion? Where did that money come from? Was it set aside? Was it reallocated? Thank you.
Sounds like a CFO.
Great question.
I'm happy to sort of take that. Just, there is no $1 billion spend at the company that does not go through the board. That's just there. There is no, people have their budget, but nobody's got $1 billion, right? So the question is, was the board involved to start with? The answer is absolutely. And when you think about the AB InBev board, you need to think about the context of the company, right? So the context of the company is we are a publicly traded company. We are traded on the Belgian Stock Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange. The company is formed through a series of acquisitions and combinations. Currently, approximately 50% of the shares of the company are controlled by a set of families of Belgian origin and a set of families from Brazilian origin. That's about 50% of the shares of the company. They also control the board, right, in the sense that they have appointment rights for director seats. So if you think about it, is a publicly controlled company, but it has a family company element to it. So we have the privilege of having a board that has a long-term view. So are they worried about what our quarterly results are next quarter? Absolutely. They want us to have good quarterly results. Are they making decisions based on next quarter's results? The answer is absolutely not. They're making decisions because they want their children to have the same type of company and the success of a company that they had and their parents had, because we can trace our roots back hundreds of years. So what they're thinking is a much more longer-term view. So was there dissent? The answer was no. Was there lots of discussion about how to use it and what's the best type of execution? Absolutely. But the long-term vision was one that's very different from many publicly traded companies. We had folks who were super supportive and said, it's the right thing to do. We want you to do it. Let us know how we can help. So from a governance standpoint, that was done. How was it decided that that's the right amount of money? Man, what we needed to know, right, was if we said, sort of in a very corporate, couchy way, well, we're going to spend a lot of money, but every year it'll be reevaluated, and we'll make sure under market conditions, it wouldn't have the impact internally that it was going to have. What people needed to know was that this commitment was there in good times, this commitment was there in bad times, this commitment was there when business was good, this commitment was there when business wasn't so good, because of its importance. And the number was selected because it was a meaningful number, right? We probably do about $55 billion of revenue a year. I mean, these are meaningful numbers. Sure, it's over a 10-year period, but nonetheless, that's a huge amount of money that needs to be spent.
That's a very good, yeah.
I can add to that. Incredible answer. I want to wear the marketing hat, which is my main stakeholder group that I needed to lead with. Say, what do you want us to spend or invest $1 billion in 10 years, $100 million every year? And I said, you have a budget to promote your brands. Allocate a percentage of that budget, and let's bring social norms marketing into it, and let's measure how the consumers engage when you bring this actionable advice. When you say, go beyond, don't drink and drive, you say, take an alternative transportation. It's bringing more meaning to that message. And there was a win-win. It's a win for the consumers, win for the communities, and win for the business. They really saw the return of the investment when allocating that budget to do the same marketing, but bringing that component of social norms to promote moderation and responsible drinking.
Can I just add, Kata, from a marketing perspective? If you think about the learnings over the last 10 years, the ads that have come out of the social norms marketing competition, which, by the way, I always describe, it's a competition because at the end we crown a winner and we give, I don't know, $100,000 for that person to run their ad in Peru or Paraguay or Nigeria, wherever it might be. But I say, don't tell this to the marketers, but I don't care who wins, right? It's not really a competition. It's actually the largest social norms training program in the world. Because in this program, if you think we'll get 200 entries, 150 entries, as we start to talk to folks about, hey, you can change this, change that, we bring in the world's leading social norms marketers in academia to go work with the teams. So they sit and they work with the teams and say, here's what you proposed, here's a way to tweak it, here's a better way to do it, here's some foundational research in social norms marketing about what will improve the ad. So they work with these academics as part of this, And as we get down to the finals, maybe it's the top 25, they literally have professors on their teams helping them tweak the ads and change the ads to get more of a social norm impact. So it really is the largest training program in social norms marketing, although we call it the largest competition, just to make sure the marketing guys, their competitive juices get going.
Here's a question here. Where's Mona? Okay.
Hi, I'm Valeria from Peru, and I'm a bit curious about the cost structure, maybe the margin profit between regular beer and non-alcoholic beer, because switching between these two, I feel like must have been a really big change with such a big bet that you're making, like in the long term. So maybe for the board or for the finance team, I don't know, the question would be how profitable it's going to be, right? And how can we switch the business to these kind of products in the long term? So how was that process?
You know, the process was one where we didn't have a choice, right? We didn't have a choice because that's what consumers wanted, right? Consumers were looking for a balanced lifestyle. Consumers were talking about health and wellness trends. One of the things our marketers do a good job on is they go out and they say, what are the trends? What are consumers thinking? And we saw a consistent and persistent view towards balanced lifestyles, health and wellness. So we knew that that's what consumers wanted. And we thought that we had a particular competitive advantage in the beverage alcohol field with beer, because we could make zero alcohol beer. And with the research and development that we had done, we had sought how best to make it better tasting. We have done non-alcohol beer for decades, but it doesn't taste like the non-alcohol beer that we have now. And that's because we spent time and resources working on making it taste better. And if you go drink a Michelob Ultra Zero and you drink a Michelob Ultra, man, you can taste the Michelob Ultra taste profile in the Zero, but it has zero alcohol. That's because we used potentially different yeasts. We will use different processes to get the alcohol out that doesn't beat the beer up as much, so it still tastes like Michelob Ultra. And the cost pressures is a really, really good insight, because we needed to know what impact will this have on our business. Beer is very much about scale. So the ability to make one extra beer, right, the marginal cost is low. But the cost of coming out with a new line of beer is very hard. So coming out with more zero products is increased costs, but as we sell more, we start to see it's essentially maybe slightly more expensive if you put all the research and development costs in. But one of the things that we work with governments on is we say one of the major costs of beer is excise tax. So one of the things we work with governments all around the world is we say, look, we think from a public health aspect, it is better to encourage folks to have lower alcohol products. So whether that's zero or whether that's 3% or 4% or 5% compared to 12 to 14%, which is wine, 40%, which is spirits, man, the more you can recognize those lower alcohol by volume products have better better health impacts, but they also have better economics, because almost all beer is brewed locally. And with that local brewing comes farmers in the field. We have 4,000 farmers in Uganda that we work with. 4,000. We have thousands of farmers around the world. But it's also those folks in the malting facilities, those folks in the transportation facilities, those folks in the beverage industry, in our breweries, the waiters, the waitresses, the bartenders. When you look at the economic impact, you start to see, and we've studied this. We've had Oxford Economics go out and tell us 1 out of every 100 jobs is directly or indirectly related to brewing and the beer business. Those are huge numbers. They're huge numbers because it's labor intensive. You have to go out and farm. You have to go out and malt. You have to go out and brew. It's expensive to go haul beer 12 ounces in a can. So when you start to look at that cost structure, it's getting close to about the same. Depending on the tax structure, governments can encourage low alcohol by volume products by having the right tax structure. And that's something we talk to them about all the time.
Mona, we're going to do 2 more questions. One here, and then the woman in the red sweater, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. My name is David. I'm from Venezuela, and my question is really related to the strategy of the organization. I think that it has been a privilege to hear you and your story about how you are transforming the culture of the organization, how you're training your colleagues to think in this with this viewpoint. And my question is related to what happens when there's a tension between the strategy of the organization and the corporate relation, if that happens. And in which point do you think that the strategy of the organization is intertwined with your strategy of bringing this to the center of the priorities of the business? I think that's part of the learnings of the case that's interesting and a challenge for many other companies.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about strategy. And Kat, I don't know if you want to talk about marketing strategy and what we do, and then I can talk about overall global strategy.
Yeah, definitely. The center of what we do is based on the share value concept. So we need to find where the interests of the consumers, the interests of our customers, the interests of the communities, the interests of the business align. When we talk about communities, it include our customers, those that sell the beer. So if we integrate all this strategy of promoting moderation, reducing harmful use of alcohol, is all about thinking in the future, in the long term, so we don't sacrifice the future for the present, ensuring that whatever we do is bringing that value, which is win for the different groups of your value chain, the different groups of interest, the different stakeholders, and as we mentioned before, when you partner with others, everybody has a role to play, everybody wins. So if you have that in mind, that's a very successful story.
Thanks, Kata. And when it comes to strategy, it was critical for us to make sure that these corporate responsibility efforts were aligned with the strategy. Indeed, I would say, and I make this argument internally, that we are the biggest driver of strategy. And let me tell you why. Our strategy has 3 pillars. One is lead and grow the category. The next is digitize and monetize our ecosystem. And the third is optimize our business. Think of the first leg of our strategy, lead and grow the category. There is nothing that will lead and grow the category like non-alcohol and low-alcohol beer. The largest segment growing in the beer business is non-alcohol beer. Now, it's off a small base. It's less than 1% of what we produce. But the growth numbers are tremendous. And they're not just tremendous this year. The growth numbers are tremendous last year or the year before. We know of countries where 15% of the beer sold is non-alcohol beer. We know of countries where less than 1% of the beer sold is non-alcohol beer, like the United States. If we can get even close to that 15%, nothing will drive leading and growing the category more than non-alcohol beer. And when it comes to social responsibility, it's a huge driver for us as well.
Can I add to that just real quick? We teach CSR in strategy, actually, Leslie and I. And it goes back to a point that I made earlier, which is for companies to actually be successful, they need to have their CSR efforts be aligned with the business strategy. Otherwise, the credibility of that effort easily gets called into question. So if it's an add-on thing over here where you just give money, then there's a question of are you whitewashing, window washing, brown washing, amber washing, green washing, whatever washing you want to say, call it, right? So it has to align with the business strategy for it to be successful. Now, we talked about how some of the goals then migrated into being the core priorities. That's different for it to be a core priority than part of the business strategy. It can still be part of the strategy. But what happened with non-alcoholic beers and low-alcohol beers is that became a visible priority because of the growth opportunities. And then from the marketing standpoint, too, I'll just say, when a company has assets, tools, capabilities, brand power, marketing prowess, data, that those that they partner with, government, nonprofits that are in communities, don't have, and the company says, we'll bring our assets forward to share with you the things that you don't have. And you leverage your credibility, your reach to get at our shared goal. That's when it becomes powerful too. That's part of core business as well, and part of strategy. There was one other question.
Thank you for such an interesting panel. I'm Maria Gracia from the GCL program, and we've been talking about strategy, and you are a great example of how doing good is good business. But I'm curious to hear about any surprises or key findings or maybe insights that you've discovered along the way in this journey. Maybe something that you were not expecting, but notice and you're happy about it, or maybe concerned. I would love to hear that.
I'm happy to go. One of the things I can remember very vividly is working with some of our partners, and the data started to show that anti-drunk driving campaigns and campaigns where you said something like, make a plan to get home, partnering with MAD, partnering with Uber, partnering in Mexico, let's say, to run a campaign that says, if you're going to go out and drink that night, make sure you have a plan to get home. Make sure that you don't drive drunk. It turned out that folks who made a plan to get home and folks who heard that message changed their drinking patterns that night. And I don't know if I have the data off the top of my head, but it was something like they consumed on average over the course of a year something like 2 more beers than they otherwise would have over the course of a year. And I was talking to some folks some of our stakeholders who said, oh, that's against what we want. We want you to get rid of that program. And to which I said, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. You would rather have someone go out to a bar, drive drunk, kill themselves or someone else on the road because they increased their consumption by 0.5 beers over the course of the year, rather than not kill themselves. And the answer was, well, we don't look at it that way. We just want overall consumption to come down. I said, well, I look at it as someone who actually drives on the roads, and I really have the opposite conclusion. So nonetheless, we still have to have those conversations. To me, that was eye-opening, right? And it was eye-opening, one, because it just goes to show the different perspectives of coming to it. But I would also say that it shows the different levels of trust and mistrust oftentimes between different stakeholders, being us in industry and some of the stakeholders we were talking about. Because I don't think that is really a credible position for someone to say they would rather have someone die on the road than to have 0.5 more beers over the course of a year. I don't think you could stand up and make that. But they've made that literally, this is not a theoretical, this is what people have told me, right? But I think my lesson from that wasn't about, oh, you're a crazy person. My lesson was the level of mistrust and the level of difference in the conversation is a gap that we need to close.
Yeah.
Can I add to this? 2 things. One is, one of the things that I found really intriguing was from the foundation side, the AB InBev foundation side and the city pilots, and going back to road safety. One of the examples of how AB InBev brought its best assets forward was in South Africa and in some other countries in Latin America and in Africa in particular. Data systems didn't exist. So data systems, or even just their method for collecting information about how many accidents, where they are, et cetera, were on paper or in Excel files. Can you imagine? So AB InBev said, we know data, we know systems. They helped to invest in creating the systems that then the community got to keep. So it's theirs to control. But they brought forward that expertise from the business to help inform creation of a system that the city then owned. And then Unitar, who John mentioned earlier, wanted to adopt that more globally. That was a big surprise. The other surprise I learned was that, I think it was this last fall, that John Blood and I, when we were in high school in opposite parts of the country, were both presidents of the Students Against Drunk Driving Club in our high school. That was my other big surprise.
That's great.
I must say, LaDon, that I can recall 10 years ago sitting on this stage with all our NGO stakeholders saying, putting a picture of me from 11th grade, I look very different, and telling them, I've been doing this job long before anyone paid me to do it.
There you go.
So John and Kata, LaDon, Leslie, the other AB InBev teammates that are here today, thank you. You guys get an Olympic gold medal in incorporating social strategies into your core business. This is transformative. It wasn't perfect, you talked about that, but it was transformative. And Kata, I want to say a special thanks to you for being on our Business for Impact advisory group.
Of course.
So Leslie will sum up, but from a Business for Impact standpoint, we're proud to be partners. And we look forward to how you're going to scale this up, John, to use your lingo.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for you and all the team has done for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie.
Wow. Well, Professor Prerogative, LaDon and I, we teach in the strategy department, corporate responsibility, and some other courses. An effective strategy for students going out, whether you're an executive program student, an MBA, undergrad, the core of a good strategy is to know how you're going to compete and how you're going to win. And a big part of strategy is being really clear on what you're not going to do, right? And that's what's hard. I'm taking your question here in the red shirt about what was surprising. Editing and overseeing this case, one of the other interesting things was learning about all the things this company did not do. One thing they said was, we are not going to lobby at the municipal or state level against what the WHO or the local health ministers are saying is best for public health. So if you say, blood alcohol has to be at this level to qualify as not drunk driving, we accept that. And what's interesting is that when you look at the competition, the beer companies that aren't part of the AB InBev portfolio, there's a lot of drive. Like, we have to lobby for our industry's best interest and pushing for profit. So that was interesting. And that kind of, I think, got you in trouble with some of your peer competitors. Because they're like, you're working against our industry interest. And I learned something from this panel today, just thinking about the governance structure as a quasi-family-driven, publicly owned company. You have the luxury of taking that long view, and it's such an important point. And also, you support laws that, at the end of the day, it's government's job to regulate and limit and protect people's health and safety, right? So in Zacatecas, Mexico, all that data that you collected, they found, drunk driving related crashes go down significantly if the bars don't stay open until 4 a.m. So lobbying to close establishments earlier. Guess who's not happy? Maybe the bar owners, right? Maybe the companies selling the alcohol, but guess who is happy? The communities that have a lot less death and injury from drunk driving. So it goes back to this idea of often the companies advocating for laws or policies that might be in the short-term negative interest of the bottom line financially, but in the long-term interest of society. This is hard for companies to do. And I think the question that brought up the governance structure is really an important one. It's something that we really struggle with here in the US with our version of capitalism, which can be obviously very focused on short term. And we're moving away from this notion of multi-stakeholder capitalism to current leadership really trying to bring it back to that primacy of shareholder. Please join me in giving a warm Hoya thank you to our amazing panel and our guest speakers.